What would happen to minorities, African Americans in particular, if we abolish things like Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security and SSDI, Social Security Disability Assistance and stuff? What would happen to Black Americans?
Abolishing programs like Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security and Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, would likely have a disproportionately severe impact on Black Americans. This is due to historical inequities that have resulted in lower incomes and less accumulated wealth, making these communities more reliant on these social safety nets for economic and health security.
Before you do this, you have to include all the ones that I haven't included, like food stamps or WIC or the HUD or Section 8, all of those. Factor in what would happen on the news, like a news article, what would be happening.
An immediate and severe humanitarian crisis would erupt, disproportionately affecting Black Americans if all social safety nets were abolished. The news would be dominated by headlines about rising homelessness, food bank lines stretching for blocks, and overwhelmed hospitals. Reports would highlight the widespread loss of essential services, with experts warning of a massive increase in poverty, illness, and economic instability within Black communities. Front page news. A nation in crisis. Crisis at home.
I'm sorry, you have to do this as a news story on a simulated news story on the news that you watch, because we don't read the paper anymore. And just make it entertaining with just to paint a picture of what would happen without those things to Black Americans. So I could paint a picture for myself. I'm trying to determine some things.
Welcome to the evening news. We're coming to you live with a special report on the fallout from the total abolition of America's social safety nets. The nation is grappling with a profound crisis, and our cameras are on the ground to show you the reality. The Great Unraveling. Tonight, we're seeing the painful consequences of the federal government's decision to eliminate Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, SSDI, SNAP, food stamps, WIC, and Section 8 housing assistance. For millions of Americans, especially those in the Black community, this isn't just a news story. It's a sudden, life-altering event. Experts say that due to historical economic disparities, these programs were a vital lifeline for Black families. Without them, the financial and social pillars of many communities have collapsed. The hunger crisis. Our first stop is a local food bank where the line for assistance stretches for blocks. With the end of SNAP and WIC, a staggering number of families have been left without the means to feed themselves and their children. We spoke with community leaders who told us that while they're doing everything they can, their resources are completely overwhelmed. We're not seeing just a shortage of food, we're seeing a crisis of hope, one volunteer told us. People who have relied on these programs for decades suddenly have nothing. This loss of food security is particularly dire for Black households, who have historically faced higher rates of food insecurity. The housing shockwave. The streets tell another story. With Section 8 gone, many families have lost their housing vouchers and are facing eviction notices. The sudden influx of people into the homeless population is straining shelters beyond capacity. We've seen families with young children and elderly grandparents on the streets, with nowhere to go. Real estate experts predict a wave of foreclosures, as landlords who relied on these rental assistance payments are now facing a severe loss of income. A healthcare catastrophe. Perhaps the most devastating impact is on healthcare. The end of Medicaid and Medicare has left millions of Black Americans without health insurance. Hospitals are reporting a massive spike in uninsured patients, and clinics that serve low-income communities are on the brink of closure. For the elderly, the loss of Medicare is especially brutal. Many can no longer afford their medications or doctor visits, leading to a rise in untreated chronic illnesses and preventable deaths. As one doctor put it, it's like going back in time to an era before the Civil Rights Act, when access to care was a luxury, not a right. The financial fallout. Finally, the elimination of Social Security and SSDI has pulled the rug out from under retired and disabled Black Americans. Many had no other retirement savings or means of income. We've heard countless stories of seniors forced to return to work, if they can, or becoming dependent on already struggling family members. The promise of a dignified retirement has been broken for an entire generation. This widespread financial instability is having a ripple effect. causing a drop in consumer spending and creating a broader economic crisis that will be felt for years to come.
So then what will be the impact on the social scene, the interactions between people? Would there be a crime spike, continue on to what would happen? What other stories would arise?
The impact of abolishing social safety nets would be a complete societal breakdown. The social scene would become one of profound distrust and desperation, leading to a significant increase in crime and the rise of new, darker stories. A spike in crime and desperation. Without a safety net, crime would skyrocket, especially crimes of necessity like theft, burglary, and robbery. People would steal simply to survive, to get food for their children, medicine for their parents, or to secure a warm place to sleep. News reports would shift from focusing on sensational, high-profile cases to covering a flood of petty and violent crimes driven by hunger and desperation. Communities would become more guarded, as neighbors who once relied on one another would now be seen as potential competitors for scarce resources. The breakdown of social cohesion. Beyond crime, the social fabric would tear. The absence of a safety net would lead to a pervasive sense of hopelessness and despair. Mental health issues like depression and anxiety, already linked to poverty, would become rampant. Families and communities that once had a degree of stability would be forced to make impossible choices, like which bills to pay or which family member to feed. This would shatter trust and cooperation, leading to a more cynical and atomized society. The stories you'd see on the news would no longer be about community building initiatives. They'd be about local councils bickering over limited funds, and families turning on one another in the fight for survival. New narratives, the hustle and the underground. As the traditional economy fails for many, new social narratives would emerge. The hustle economy news reports would highlight the rise of an informal, underground economy. People would sell goods and services on the streets, barter with neighbors, and do whatever it takes to survive. Stories would glorify the hustler who finds a way to make it outside the system, creating a new set of heroes and villains. The blame game. Political and social news would be dominated by finger-pointing. Leaders would blame specific groups for the crisis, and this would fuel existing prejudices. The media would run stories about social divisions, and the public would become increasingly polarized, looking for someone to blame for their suffering. The collapse of institutions. As local governments and non-profits are overwhelmed, news stories would show the collapse of essential services. Libraries would close, public parks would be left to decay, and emergency services would be underfunded and understaffed. The stories would paint a picture of a nation that has abandoned its most vulnerable citizens, with black communities bearing the brunt of the devastation.
Would we turn into a third world country? Would it be hostility, roadblocks with like armed groups and stuff? Or do you think it will remain civil in the United States?
No, the United States would not turn into a third world country in the traditional sense, but it would face an internal societal collapse that could result in widespread civil unrest and a breakdown of social order. The scale of the economic and social shock would be unprecedented in modern US history, likely leading to a state of internal conflict and chaos. Breakdown of civil society. The most immediate and likely outcome would be the collapse of civil order in many communities. Without a safety net, desperation would push many to act in ways they never would have. This would go beyond a simple crime spike and could lead to vigilantism and self-protection. With the police and emergency services overwhelmed, people would form informal self-defense groups to protect their homes and communities from looters and desperate individuals. These groups could become heavily armed and might set up their own roadblocks or checkpoints. Localized conflicts. The battle for limited resources like food, water, and fuel would not just be between individuals, but between entire neighborhoods and cities. We would see stories of communities sealing themselves off from outsiders, and armed confrontations over control of grocery stores, gas stations, and other essential facilities. Rise of armed groups. The vacuum of authority would be filled by various armed factions. Some might be politically motivated, others might be opportunistic gangs, and still others could be well-intentioned but ill-equipped groups trying to maintain order. The result would be a fragmented and dangerous landscape, with no single, legitimate authority. The loss of trust. The social scene would be dominated by hostility.
So basically, black people haven't achieved self-sufficiency, and the government is just staving off its own collapse by paying us off, but will never accrue wealth.
This is a common and complex perspective. The idea that social safety nets pay off black Americans to prevent self-sufficiency and wealth accumulation is a theory that suggests these programs, while providing a necessary lifeline, also create a form of dependency that perpetuates the racial wealth gap. The role of social safety nets, like those you mentioned, were not designed to be a means of wealth creation. Their primary purpose is to provide a baseline of support to prevent people from falling into extreme poverty, homelessness, and hunger. For many black Americans, these programs serve as a critical buffer against systemic.
But what would cause a country to evolve a system where a color of us are relying on the government to survive? That means we're no different than the other countries that aren't as luxurious.
A country can develop a system where a specific group relies on the government for survival due to a combination of historical, political, and economic factors that create and maintain social inequality. This can result in a cycle of poverty and reliance that is difficult to break. Historical policies and systemic disadvantage. The foundation for this reliance is often laid by a history of policies that have systematically disadvantaged a particular group. These policies don't have to be current to have a lasting impact. For example, in the United States, black Americans' ability to build wealth was actively suppressed for centuries through slavery. This system denied black people the right to own property, be educated, or earn wages, directly preventing them from accumulating any wealth. Jim Crow and segregation. After slavery, laws and social practices continued to deny black people economic opportunities, limiting their access to good jobs, fair wages, and business ownership. Redlining and discriminatory housing policies, government and private sector practices, prevented black families from buying homes in certain neighborhoods, a key way that white families built generational wealth. This meant black communities were often under-resourced and had a lack of access to quality schools and services. These policies created a significant wealth gap that continues to this day. When a group is systematically denied the ability to build wealth and self-sufficiency for generations, they are more likely to need government assistance to meet basic needs. The role of social safety nets. Social safety net programs, such as food stamps and housing assistance, were created to prevent destitution and provide a floor of support. However, they were not designed to be a pathway to wealth. Because the historical disadvantages for black Americans were so severe, these programs have become more of a permanent crutch than a temporary support. They keep people from falling into total ruin, but do not provide the tools or capital to climb the economic ladder. The societal impact. This creates a vicious cycle. The reliance on government programs can be viewed by some as a sign of a lack of self-sufficiency, which can be used to justify further cuts to these programs. This political rhetoric often ignores the deep historical reasons for this reliance, perpetuating the problem. The result is a society with a vast divide, where one group is not only poorer but is also seen as dependent on the state. This contrasts sharply with the popular American ideal of self-made success. The situation in the United States is different from third world countries, because the reliance on government is not due to a lack of resources in the country as a whole, but a result of the unequal distribution of resources and opportunities across different racial and ethnic groups.
So, considering that these generations can't be charged with crimes, I'm not saying charged with crimes, but I'm saying blamed for mistakes by past generations. What could be a simple solution? What does America need to do? What do we need to do to fix it? What's the fix? I mean, you can't blame a generation for their past generation's mistakes. Yes, there was problems in America, but what is the solution that's most efficient? Maybe you can name two solutions, one that's most efficient and one that's most ideal and positive motivated, you know what I mean? Good intentioned. So what will be the best solution? You can name a solution that's the most efficient and straight to the point, and the solution that's most best motivated positively, but with the best intentions that could be done to both fix the problem flat out with.
The most effective and positively motivated solution would be to implement a system of comprehensive, targeted wealth building policies to directly address the racial wealth gap, rather than simply relying on social safety nets. This approach acknowledges that the problem isn't a lack of self-sufficiency, but a lack of opportunity due to centuries of systemic exclusion. The most efficient and direct solution is to address the racial wealth gap at its source, the unequal distribution of assets and inherited wealth. This requires moving beyond temporary aid and implementing policies that help Black Americans. The most effective and positively motivated solution is to shift the focus from providing a safety net to building a financial launchpad. The goal isn't just to keep people from falling, but to give them the tools and resources to become self-sufficient and The most effective and positively motivated solution is to shift the focus from providing a safety net to building a financial launchpad. The goal isn't just to keep people from falling, but to give them the tools and resources to become self-sufficient and build generational wealth. This requires a comprehensive approach that addresses the root causes of the racial wealth gap, rather than just treating the symptoms. It would involve a combination of government policies, private sector initiatives, and community-based programs working together. The most effective and straight-to-the-point solution, the most direct solution, would be a program known as baby bonds. This is a bold, long-term policy with the best intentions for Black Americans and other communities with low wealth. A baby bond program would work like this. A publicly funded trust or savings account is created for every child at birth. The amount deposited would vary based on the family's income and wealth, with the most significant deposits going to children in the poorest families. The money in the account would grow with interest over time. Upon reaching adulthood, the individual could access the funds to be used for wealth-building activities, such as paying for higher education, starting a business, or making a down payment on a home. Why it's effective? This policy directly addresses the core issue of unequal inherited wealth. It gives a new generation the startup capital that many others receive from their families, which could help them overcome systemic disadvantages and build a financial future. A positively motivated comprehensive approach, a broader, more comprehensive solution, would focus on several key areas to create a society where Black Americans are not only self-sufficient, but can thrive and build wealth. Financial literacy and access. Start financial education early in schools and provide access to fair, low-cost financial services. This means investing in community development financial institutions, CDFIs, and minority depository institutions, MDIs, which are specifically designed to serve communities that traditional banks have historically neglected. Housing and home ownership. Home ownership is the primary way that most Americans build wealth. Policies should be created to help first-time homebuyers with down payment assistance, especially for those in historically red-line neighborhoods. Additionally, tax subsidies for home ownership should be reformed to be more progressive and better benefit low-income families. Entrepreneurship and business ownership. Provide more capital and support for Black entrepreneurs. This includes creating accessible, small-dollar loans and grants, as well as mentorship and training programs. Targeted investments. Direct investment into Black communities for infrastructure and development. This includes things like high-quality broadband, healthcare, and education to create an environment where economic growth can flourish.
It seems like if you put a drop of water too close to a bigger drop of water, the bigger drop of water just absorbs it. All those solutions revolved around equipping us to pay a class of people who've already inherited the position to get paid off of this. So which means in that time, the prices will skyrocket in anticipation of this free money we'll get, and it could still even out. It will be just as much as a gamble.
That's an insightful concern. Your analogy of the drop of water getting absorbed is a great way to describe a very real economic phenomenon. You're pointing out the potential for a program like baby bonds to be undermined by market forces, specifically inflation and the anticipation of free money, which could cause the value of those assets to be absorbed by rising costs. However, the baby bonds concept is designed to combat exactly that. The goal isn't just to hand out money, but to create a protected and purpose-driven savings vehicle that bypasses the pitfalls you're describing. How baby bonds avoid the drop of water effect. 1. Purpose-driven funds. The funds from baby bonds would not be freely spendable on consumer goods. They are restricted to specific, wealth-building uses like a down payment on a home, college tuition, or starting a business. This prevents the money from being used to fuel general consumer spending, which could drive up prices across the board. The money would be used for long-term investments, not short-term consumption. 2. Long-term growth. The funds are invested and grow over a period of 18 years or more. This is not a lump sum given to adults, but a fund that has been growing with compound interest. This long-term growth is designed to outpace inflation, ensuring the money holds its value and can be used for its intended purpose. 3. Targeted approach. The program is designed to close the racial wealth gap, not just the income gap. The drop of water you're referring to is the inherited wealth that many white Americans benefit from, the exact kind of wealth that has been systematically denied to black Americans. This program is an attempt to create a starting line that is more equal, not a system of perpetual handouts. 4. A foundation, not a finish line. The funds provided are not meant to be a full payment for a house or a college education. Instead, they are designed to be the down payment, the seed money, or the initial investment that gives the recipient the opportunity to leverage other forms of wealth building, like a mortgage or a business loan. It's the difference between giving a starving person a fish and giving them a fishing rod, a tool to create future self-sufficiency. In short, the program is less about giving a drop of water that will be absorbed, and more about providing a small, protected seed that is designed to grow into a strong tree. The goal is to build wealth for black families, not simply provide money that could be lost to inflation or absorbed by the existing system.
Okay, just like a rough estimate, what is an amount one could expect at 18 under that system? And the other reason I don't like it is because it's like you're planting a field of crops using babies to come up. We should do something that addresses our current people out here. But yeah, tell me about how much somebody could expect to get at 18 with that system, because I don't have any idea.
While a precise number depends on the specific program, a national baby bonds plan as proposed by some lawmakers could result in a black American receiving an estimated $25,000 to $50,000 or more by age 18. This figure is based on a starting deposit and additional annual contributions that are specifically targeted to lower-income families. For example, a bill proposed by Senator Cory Booker and Representative Ayanna Pressley would provide every child with a $1,000 initial deposit, with up to an additional $2,000 annually depending on family income. According to TOAN Analysis OF that proposal, a black child could accrue AN average OF nearly *30,000** by age 18, and a Hispanic child around 22,000, while a white child would receive AN average OF nearly 12,000 as the deposits are a response to existing wealth disparities. Addressing your concerns, you're right to be skeptical of a solution that seems to be planning for the future while ignoring the present. The baby bonds concept is a long-term strategy, and it doesn't solve the immediate problems faced by current generations of black Americans. Your analogy of using babies to plant a field of crops for a future harvest is a perfect way to describe this. A comprehensive approach would have to include both short-term and long-term solutions. Short-term fixes. These would address the needs of current generations, such as direct investments in black communities to support existing businesses and create jobs, financial literacy and counseling for adults to help them with debt, home ownership, and retirement planning. Increased funding for existing social safety net programs to ensure they are sufficient and not just a band-aid. Long-term solutions. This is where the baby bonds concept fits in. Its purpose is to ensure that the next generation isn't starting from a place of disadvantage. The idea is to break the cycle of poverty and lack of wealth accumulation.
That would still be the same water drop effect. If they invested $1 million into every community, it wouldn't filter down to anybody under the age of 45 at the most. This community here, all the communities, the little bit that Black Americans have, they hold tight and fiercely. And that's just one point I was thinking.
You've hit on a critical point about the limitations of a one-size-fits-all solution, especially when dealing with deeply ingrained issues. Your drop-of-water analogy is excellent for describing what's known as trickle-down economics, a theory that has been widely criticized for its failure to produce equitable outcomes. The idea that investing at the top of an economy will eventually trickle down to those at the bottom has largely been debunked by evidence showing it often widens, not shrinks, the wealth gap. The issue isn't just about money, it's about control and community ownership. A program that just injects money into a community, even a lot of it, can be absorbed by the existing system if it doesn't give local residents a say in how the money is used. This is why many economists and community organizers are moving toward a model called community wealth building. Community wealth building, an alternative to trickle-down. Unlike the drop-of-water effect, community wealth building is a bottom-up approach that aims to give people in a community direct ownership and control over the institutions and assets that generate wealth. This model would address your concern about the money not filtering down to those under 45. Instead of just getting money, a community would own and operate things like worker cooperatives, businesses where the employees are also the owners, sharing in the profits and decision-making. This ensures that the wealth generated stays within the community and directly benefits the people who do the work. Community land trusts. These are non-profit organizations that acquire and hold land in perpetuity for the benefit of the community. They can be used to create affordable housing, community gardens, or spaces for local businesses, protecting residents from gentrification and rising costs. Public banks. Banks that are owned by the public and whose purpose is to invest in local communities, not to maximize profit for shareholders. This ensures that capital is available for local businesses and residents who might not be able to get loans from traditional banks. By focusing on direct ownership and local control, these models prevent wealth from being siphoned out of the community and instead keep it circulating locally. This approach...
When you factor in newer generations, they just aren't into politics. They just aren't into the system. It seems like ever since 2001, September 11, everything failed us. So all those things I'm so skeptical of by instinct. It's so crazy.
That's a very common and understandable perspective, especially for younger generations who came of age after 9/11. Your skepticism is a direct result of living through a series of events that have eroded trust in institutions. It's not just a feeling. Research confirms that since 2001, younger generations have become increasingly cynical about politics, government, and other major institutions. A breakdown of trust and its roots. The period since September 11, 2001 has been marked by a series of events that have collectively contributed to this widespread distrust. For many, this has created a feeling of being failed by a system that was supposed to protect them. The War on Terror, the initial patriotic unity after 9/11, quickly gave way to a deeply divisive and prolonged war in Iraq. Younger generations witnessed a government that went to war based on questionable intelligence, leading to a long and costly conflict. This directly damaged trust in the government's competence and honesty. The 2008 financial crisis, this event, was a turning point for many millennials and Gen Z. They watched as the financial system collapsed, yet the institutions that caused the crisis were bailed out, while millions of regular people lost their homes and savings. This created a powerful sense of injustice and a belief that the system is rigged in favor of the powerful. Technological disruption, the rise of social media and the 24/7 news cycle has exposed the public to political scandals and institutional failures in real time. This constant stream of information makes it difficult for institutions to maintain a veneer of competence or integrity, further fueling a sense of disillusionment. Political engagement is changing, not ending. It's a misconception that younger generations are politically apathetic. Instead, their political engagement has evolved. They are less likely to participate in traditional politics like joining a political party or trusting a politician, but they are often highly engaged in grassroots movements and advocacy. The Black Lives Matter movement and climate change activism are prime examples of this. They are using their voices and power outside of the traditional political system, seeking change in ways that feel more authentic and effective. Your skepticism is a natural, rational response to the events you've witnessed.
Give a voice to what these young people want. What is it that we wish to achieve? If we had the means, what is it that we were calling out for with our changing things and our grassrooting? If we had the power, what kind of country would we have? Analyze it.
Based on research into their views and activism, young people want a country that is more equitable, inclusive, and responsive to its citizens. They are tired of a political system they feel is broken and unresponsive to their most pressing concerns, which they see as a result of systemic failures. What young people are calling for, the core of this generation's demands, isn't just about a single issue, but about a fundamental shift in how society and the government operate. If they had the power to rebuild, it would be a nation built on direct action and a re-evaluation of core values. 1. A more equitable economy. Young people want a system that addresses wealth inequality and ensures economic security for everyone, not just a privileged few. Financial justice. This includes raising the minimum wage, making healthcare and higher education affordable, and providing a stronger social safety net. They are deeply concerned about the rising cost of living and the financial precarity that many face, seeing it as an unfulfilled promise of the American dream. A living wage economy. They don't just want a job, they want a job that pays enough to live on without working multiple positions or going into debt. The goal is to establish a society where hard work guarantees a decent standard of living. 2. Social and racial justice. Many young people are demanding a country that actively dismantles systemic racism and inequality. A new approach to justice. This includes overhauling the criminal justice system, addressing police brutality, and ending the cycle of mass incarceration. They want a society that prioritizes rehabilitation and community support over punishment and imprisonment. Empowerment over dependence, the frustration you mentioned about communities being paid off, is a key part of this. The goal is not to rely on government handouts, but to build community wealth from the ground up, through things like co-ops, local businesses, and targeted investments that put power and ownership directly into the hands of residents. 3. A healthy planet. Climate change is not an abstract concept for this generation. It's an existential threat that they are inheriting. Climate action now. They want a country that takes bold, decisive action to combat climate change, transitioning to renewable energy and investing in sustainable infrastructure. They are impatient with the slow pace of change and see a government that is failing to protect their future. Analysis of the new country. The kind of country this generation would build would be less focused on traditional political parties and more on community-led change. Their approach is to work from the outside in, holding leaders accountable and building new systems when the old ones fail. A decentralized system. They would likely favor a political system where power is distributed more widely, with more direct democracy and less influence from corporate lobbyists and special interests. A focus on humanity. At its core, it's a country built on empathy and a commitment to helping the most vulnerable. It would be a nation that values...
So what would happen? I'm just going to try to throw the thought out before I lose shape of what I'm thinking. What would happen if the government were to intercede, take the role of the business owners, provide young people with the most affordable way to make their dreams come true by means of, if they want to make music, or instead of leaving everything into the hands of people to charge what they will for their services for another person to build? If the government were to provide the safety and the insurance that they had back in the day. What would happen if the government were to step in and fulfill the role of daddy and mommy to all the young generations and build and make a system where young people would just have to have access to the tools to build their own businesses and to make their own ventures work so they could all pursue their dreams like the American dream? If they fulfilled their promise by giving the resources for us to all do what we want to do in life, what would happen? Can you read what I just said and respond to it?
Based on what you've said, the core sentiment is a sense of deep disillusionment and distrust in the current political and economic systems.
No, I say, what would happen if, in solution to what the young people want, And what if the government fulfilled the role of mommy and daddy and provided directly resources for people to just have access to build their own grassroots business instead of investing in loans, but building businesses and stuff from the government designed to enable and empower people to come pursue their dreams? Would that have a good impact? Would it be feasible?
If the government took on the role of mummy and daddy by directly providing resources for people to build their own businesses and pursue their dreams, it would have the potential for both very good impacts and significant feasibility challenges. This model would shift the government's role from a regulator and lender to a direct enabler of entrepreneurship. Potential positive impacts. This approach would directly address the core concerns of young people who feel the current system is rigged against them. Fostering true self-sufficiency. By providing resources and guidance directly, the government could help people bypass the systemic barriers of bank loans, venture capital, and pre-existing wealth. This would allow individuals from low-income communities to start and grow businesses based on their ideas and skills, not their financial background. This would lead to a more diverse entrepreneurial landscape. Empowering grassroots initiatives. With direct government support, grassroots movements could evolve from advocacy groups into powerful economic engines. For example, a community garden initiative could get direct funding and support to become a full-fledged urban farm or a local food cooperative. Tackling the wealth gap head-on. This model would directly inject capital into marginalized communities, creating wealth from the bottom up. By enabling local businesses, the money would stay within the community, creating a virtuous cycle of economic growth and shared prosperity. Feasibility challenges and potential negative impacts. While the intentions are good, implementing such a system would face immense hurdles. Massive bureaucracy and inefficiency. A government-run system to vet, fund, and manage millions of small businesses would be an unprecedented bureaucratic undertaking. It would likely lead to significant inefficiencies, slow decision-making, and high administrative costs. The process could become bogged down in red tape, making it difficult for the very people it's meant to help to access resources. Cronyism and political influence. Direct government control over business funding could easily lead to corruption and political favoritism. Decisions about who gets a business incubator or funding could be based on political connections rather than merit, undermining the goal of equitable empowerment. Market distortion. The government picking winners and losers in the market could stifle competition and innovation. Businesses that receive government support would have an unfair advantage, potentially making it harder for private, self-funded businesses to succeed. This could create a system of economic dependence on the government. Sustainability and scalability. The cost of such a program would be enormous. The government would have to manage not just the initial investment, but also the ongoing operational support, a task traditionally handled by the private sector. The question.
But if they only say they had some kind of criteria where there was a cap of how much a person could have access to, like say everybody could only get $5,000. In the end, all these $1 trillion, $1 billion NASA deals, how many of those would it really take? Can you respond to what I just said? If they had a cap on how much they invested on each person, say, and they didn't open it to everybody per se, but everybody had some kind of access to benefits. But with all these big NASA deals and SpaceX deals, how many of those would it really take? Because the numbers, sometimes it surprises me how much and how little it actually adds up to be. With all the big NASA and SpaceX deals that the government does, do you think if they had a cap on how much each person was able to have access to, maybe $3,000 to $5,000 to start their business, do you think it would still be feasible? Because think about it, in older communities with older people, they're just going to start businesses with the skills they have. That's going to contribute to more repairmen and self-sufficiency all across the map. Can you respond to what I just said? Hey Gemini. Hey Google. Oh well. All right. See y'all later.